Hello students, today we'll discuss punctuation. Punctuation is an extremely important topic both for the SAT writing section and the ACT English section. It's quite simple if you know the rules, and since it's quite weighty in terms of its contribution to both these tests, it helps to know this and get your accuracy up. So let's begin. Okay, the first thing we need to understand for correct usage of punctuation, especially the comma and the semicolon, is the difference between a dependent clause and an independent clause. So an independent clause and a dependent clause, they are both clauses, which means that they both contain a subject and a verb, but the difference comes between what an independent clause does and what a dependent clause does. An independent clause contains a subject and a verb and expresses a complete thought. For example, I will go to the movies tonight, right? This is a complete sentence, and so it's an independent clause. He finished the project yesterday. This also is a complete sentence, and so is an independent clause. A dependent clause, like any clause, will have a subject and a verb, but it would not express a complete thought. For example, because he has not finished his work, right? So this is not complete, right? I know that I need to add something here for this to make sense. Because he has not finished his work, he'll stay back late. Similarly, if I say yes to the job offer, this too is not complete because there's something else that needs to be said. If I say yes to the job offer, I'll have to move to another city. So this distinction between an independent clause and a dependent clause is very important as we discuss punctuation. So let's say my purpose is to connect two independent clauses, that is to say two independent sentences. Then I can use a semicolon. For example, I'm tall, he's short, right? This is one independent clause, and this is the second independent clause. So it's like a full stop. I can just put a semicolon between them. I'm tall, he's short, right? The production house is delaying the start of the film. Therefore, the actor has decided to leave the project. Now, if you look at it carefully, this part is the first sentence. The production house is delaying the start of the film. Therefore, the actor has decided to leave the project is the second sentence, right? And so if I were to put a full stop between the first and the second sentence, I would put it here after film, right? Because therefore, which is a connector, is kind of explaining why the actor has decided to leave the project. So therefore comes with the second sentence, and the reason is in the first sentence. And so a semicolon comes here, right? A very important question on these tests would have you put a comma in this position and ask you to correct it. So as I explain the next rule, you will see that a comma between two independent sentences is not allowed. That creates a run-on sentence, which is a grammatical mistake. You cannot have a comma between two independent sentences, right? So that is why a semicolon or a full stop is required after film. Now, when can I use a comma to connect two independent sentences? When I have a conjunction with a comma, a coordinating conjunction. How can I remember a coordinating conjunction? With the acronym FANBOYS. F stands for, A stands for and, N stands for not, B for but, O for or, Y for yet, and S stands for so. These are coordinating conjunctions, and with a comma, they can be used to connect two independent sentences. I want pizza, but he wants falafel, right? The comma plus but connects I want pizza, he wants falafel. Those are two independent sentences. Running is a popular sport, yet its long-term effects on the body are not widely understood. Running is a popular sport is independent clause 1. Its long-term effects on the body are not widely understood is independent clause 2. And to join them, I use a comma plus a fan voice. So in short, if you're looking to join two independent clauses, you can use a semicolon, just a semicolon by itself, no problem there. Or you can use a comma with a coordinating conjunction, that is one of the fan boys. Remember that a connector is not the same as a conjunction, right? A connector is words like therefore. It is words like however. It is words like in fact, meanwhile, right? So connectors are words that give definition, that provide transition between sentences. They give you a sense of what the sentences are trying to say. And so when you see a connector, you would think of it as starting a new sentence. And so you would put a semicolon before it, right? So that is a very important distinction because, as I said, there will be questions like the sentence, the production house is delaying the start of the film, where they'll put a comma after film, creating a run-on error and expect you to correct it. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's say the purpose of my punctuation is to separate the dependent from the independent clause. In that case, we use a comma, but there is a caveat to that. I use the comma when the dependent clause is first and the independent clause is next. Though he has not finished the work, that's a dependent clause, comma, he promises to submit the assignment by tomorrow. So I have two clauses, the first dependent and the second independent. And to join them, I'm putting a comma here. But let's say the chronology, or rather the chronology. The chronology was reversed, and I put the independent clause first and the dependent clause next. Then I would not need a comma, right? I came home early. This is the independent clause because I forgot my car's keys. This is the dependent clause, and you don't see a comma here, right? So when the independent comes first in a sentence, followed by a dependent clause, do not use a comma between them. Because I'm unable to write this note myself, comma, I will seek help from a friend. Again, dependent first, independent next, so a comma is required. Okay. Let's go to the next one. What about if I want to separate additional information in a sentence, right? Additional information in a sentence is information that you can take out without affecting the grammatical accuracy of the sentence, right? So the punctuation that you can use is a comma pair or a dash pair, right? So let's understand how this works. The house at the end of the street, comma, which has been vacant for 3 years, comma, was sold yesterday. So if I want to kind of read this sentence, I can simply say the house at the end of the street was sold yesterday, right? That is grammatically accurate. That's a complete sentence. So the fact that it has been vacant for 3 years, this is known as additional or non-essential information. This is additional or non-essential information. And whenever you have that, you put a comma before it and you put a comma after it, right? So the house at the end of the street, comma, which has been vacant for 3 years, comma, was sold yesterday. Another example, there is little to defend in the president's actions, but crucially, he did not ask his supporters to resort to violence. Now, I see many commas here, right? I see a comma here, I see a comma here, and I see a comma here. So students sometimes get confused that when I see a pair of commas, does it always mean that the part between it is additional and can be removed? No, it would depend on the context. Understand the context here. This comma is for but, right? Let me make that a little more clear. So I'm going to change the color and explain this. Yeah, this comma is for but. They go together. This comma and but, because that's like just comma plus fanboys. Because I have two independent clauses here. The first clause is there is little to defend in the president's actions. The second clause is he did not ask his supporters to resort to violence. And they are contrasting views, right? There is little to defend. What he did was not correct. But at the same time, it's important to note that he did not actually ask his supporters to resort to violence. So I'm connecting two independent clauses with a comma plus a fanboys. So this, the first comma is for the fanboys but. Now, let's change the color again and try and understand what is this word crucially doing here. This word crucially is trying to explain the meaning inherent in the sentence, right? Why is it doing that? Or rather, how is it doing that? It's saying that I'm not defending the president's actions. What happened was wrong. But there is a crucial point to note that he did not ask his supporters to resort to violence. At no point did he tell them to engage in violence. So that crucially is an adverb that provides added emphasis to the point made in the sentence. But at the same time, that crucially is not required in the sentence, because even if I took it out, my sentence can still stand grammatically, right? For example, let me just clear everything. Let me say I remove this. What does my sentence say? There is little to defend in the president's actions, but he did not ask his supporters to resort to violence. That's a perfectly capable sentence, grammatically correct. So what crucially is doing here is it is providing emphasis to a point. And so because it is additional, I have a comma before crucially and a comma after crucially. So it's very important to understand the context. If you come and say that, why can't I think of these two commas as making but non-essential? Because then there's no meaning to the sentence. Can I say there is little to defend in the president's actions? Crucially, he did not ask his supporters to resort to violence. I can't say that with a comma between these two because that would make a run-on mistake. So always try and understand the context of usage, whether it's a single comma, whether it's a paired comma. Is the single comma there because it's acting with fanboys? Is the paired comma there because it has some additional information between it? So those questions will help you understand punctuation better. Okay, a dash is what is this longer kind of punctuation mark. Don't confuse it with the hyphen, which is the short mark, right? A hyphen is just used to make compound words like father-in-law. That's a hyphen, right? That is not what we talk about when we talk about a dash. A dash is this slightly longish mark, which is frequently tested on the SAT and ECT. You don't see a lot of hyphen questions, but you see a lot of dash questions. So a dash, in fact, I think we should make it a little bigger so that it's very clear that we are referring to a dash here. Yeah, let me just add another. Yeah, this is how a dash should ideally look, right? So nobody, not even me, expected the meeting to end so abruptly. So here too, my main sentence says nobody expected the meeting to end so abruptly. And this not even me is kind of additional information. And so I've put it between a pair of dashes. So when you have additional information in a sentence, you can put it between a pair of commas, or you can put it between a pair of dashes. This is also something very commonly tested, so be careful. Okay, let me save this. We made some changes. Okay. Now, we spoke about additional information. Let's also look at an example of essential information. Essential information is basically described by the term restrictive phrase. And restrictive phrases are not set off by commas. That is to say, they do not have commas around them because they are necessary to understand the context, what the subject is saying, right? For example, the girl who is sick missed 3 days of school, right? Now, let's say I remove this and I say the girl missed 3 days of school. That wouldn't make sense because I'm defining the girl by the fact that she was sick. So this is essential to defining the girl. And so I don't put commas around who is sick. The dog that ate the rotten steak fell down and died. If I remove this, the sentence becomes the dog fell down and died, and that's not correct because I'm not talking about any dog. I'm talking about a particular dog that died because it had eaten the rotten steak. And so these are restrictive phrases that do not have commas around them because they are essential to understanding what the sentence is saying. Okay, if my purpose is to connect items in a list, then I just use a comma. This is something that we have been doing since forever. The table was overturned, the mattress was torn apart, and the dresser drawers were strewn all over the floor. So there are three actions happening here. The table's overturning, the mattress was torn apart, and the dresser drawers. So just to connect them, I use a comma. This last comma before the and, this is known as the Oxford comma. And it is not required in every case, but the SAT really seems to like it. So if you find a comma before the final and where the list finishes, that is absolutely okay. And just go ahead and take that as a correct, right? Now, this other rule that I have referred to, this is not frequently tested, but you should know it. In case one of the items on the list itself has a comma for some reason, then the items themselves are separated by semicolons, right? What do I mean by that? I'm saying the castaways included a professor who was the group's leader, semicolon, and an actress, semicolon, and a housewife. So now again, I have three items, a professor, an actress, and a housewife. But I'm not using a comma to separate these items because it'll become a little confusing for the reader because I'm already describing the professor as the group's leader by using a comma here. So for the reader to kind of try and figure out which commas are for description and which commas are for separating items on the list can get confusing. So when there are items that have commas within them, separate items on the list with semicolons. Okay, that was this slide. Let's go to the next one. Okay, if the purpose is to introduce a list of 3 or more items, then you use a colon. A colon is something quite ingenious, quite flexible, quite versatile. It can be used to introduce a list. We need 3 things: money, expertise, and experience, right? So this is a colon to introduce these 3 things. But they can also introduce quotations and explanations, right? There is only one thing to do. What is that one thing? Go to the police and tell them everything. So I think a better way to describe a colon is not just to start a list, but to answer an expectation created by the sentence. it answers an expectation created by the sentence. What does that mean? When I say there is only one thing to do, the sentence creates an expectation about what that one thing is, right? As a reader, I want to know what that one thing is. So you put a colon and you tell the reader what that one thing is. Go to the police and tell them everything, right? When I say we need three things, it creates an expectation of what those three things are. So you put a colon and you mention those three things, right? Okay, this is really important with regard to a colon. It can only come at the end of a complete sentence, right? There are so many colon questions that you will get right if you remember this rule. What does this mean? Can I say I want to buy fruits, veggies, and cake? I can't say this. This is wrong because I want to buy is not a complete sentence, right? So if it's not a complete sentence, I can't put this colon here. So this colon needs to go. And you can just say, I want to buy fruits, veggies, and cake. If I wanted to put a colon in this sentence, I would have to say something like this. I want to buy a few items, colon, fruits, veggies, and cake. This is fine because I want to buy a few items is a complete sentence. And so a colon there makes sense. So this is fine. This is a very important rule, right? I can't stress enough. So please remember this. Okay, a dash can also be used in place of a colon, right? It can be used in place of a colon, but colons are supposed to be more formal. So I can also say we need three things, dash, money, expertise, and experience. But a colon is preferred because it's considered more formal. Okay, now, interestingly, we need to actually discuss the dash, right? Because we have already seen that a dash pair is used for additional information, just as a comma pair is. We have also seen that a single dash can be used in place of a colon, but it's less formal. But a single dash can also be used to signal a break in a sentence when you're trying to say something dramatic or unexpected, right? Let me explain this third point because it's important and it has been tested in some recent SAT tests. Apple's lucrative relationship with its developer community has never been more vital or more tempestuous. Now, why is the author decided to put a dash here? Because there is like a break in the sentence here, right? Why? Because I'm saying the relationship that Apple has with its developer community has never been more vital, which means never been more important, never been more, like there's skin in the game. It's really important. But then I'm also saying it's tempestuous, it's chaotic, it's stormy, it's not always stable, right? So there is kind of this contrast which I'm trying to bring to the sentence. And so a break after vital kind of prepares the reader for that contrast, right? Because to the reader, it's a little bit of a shock that the relationship is both vital and tempestuous. So that dash signals that break. Okay, 5 years later, the distance to some celestial objects was determined to be much greater than the size of the Milky Way, which meant that there were other galaxies beyond our own. Now, again, you see that a comma here would work perfectly fine, no problem. But the author has chosen to use a dash because there is something that was discovered about the size of the Milky Way, and that signals that there were other galaxies beyond our own. And that's like a significant finding. That's like a big deal, right? So again, to signal that dramatic or unexpected thing, you put a dash after Milky Way, right? So sometimes it's not just about choosing the correct punctuation, but thinking of what might work better, right? So as I said, in the Milky Way sentence, a comma could also work after Milky Way, but that sense of break is conveyed better with a dash. Right? Okay, let's go on. Okay, if you want to discuss the possessive case, you use an apostrophe. The possessive case means when something belongs to someone. For example, the dog's food is ready. So when it's a singular, I just say dog apostrophe S. But if I have a plural possessive, this is a plural possessive. Like when I say we removed the bottle's labels, I'm talking about the labels of more than one bottle. I put the apostrophe after S, as I have done here, right? The apostrophe will go after S. Okay, if I have a plural that does not end with S, like something like women or men or children, these are plural words that don't end with S. Then for possessive, I just treat them as a singular word and put an apostrophe in S. The women's locker room needs to be cleaned. So just an apostrophe with an S would work here. Okay, what about if I have multiple subjects? How do I show possession there? If I have Nick and Nora, and I only put an apostrophe after Nora, then it means that the dog belongs jointly to Nick and Nora. It's their dog, right? So I don't say Nick's and Nora's dog. I just say Nick and Nora's dog. I just put the apostrophe S after the second subject to say that the dog belongs to them both. But if I say Dan's and Johan's socks are dirty, then I'm trying to say, obviously they have their own pairs of socks, right? They don't share socks. So I'm saying Dan's socks are dirty and Johan's socks are dirty. So when the possession is individual, I would put apostrophe S with every subject. But when it is joint, I'll only put it with the last subject. And then we have possessive pronouns. Possessive pronouns do not use an apostrophe. This is one of the SAT's favorite questions, right? This wallet is yours, no apostrophe. This house is theirs, no apostrophe. The dog wagged its tail, no apostrophe. So as you may be aware already, the difference between ITS and IT apostrophe S is one of the SAT's and ACT's favorite questions. IT apostrophe S is not possessive. Please remember, it looks possessive because of the apostrophe, but it's not possessive. It's an abbreviation for it is. For example, it's a great day today. So it is a great day today. So I'll put IT apostrophe S. ITS without the apostrophe is the possessive, right? Like what we have here. The dog wagged its tail, the dog's own tail, right? So please remember the possessive pronoun not having an apostrophe so that you don't make mistakes here. Okay, and let's go to the next one, the question mark. The question mark is interesting because it is not very frequently tested on these exams, but there is one area where some question mark questions have started coming recently, and that is when you are asking a sentence in indirect speech, rather asking a question in indirect speech, right? So what do I mean by that? So for example, if I say, he said, will you come to the party? So I put a question mark right here because it's a question. What he said was a question. This is direct speech. Direct speech. Now, if I were to say the same thing in indirect speech, I would say, he asked me if I would come to the party. And now I put a full stop because now it's a sentence. I've converted his question into a sentence in a direct speech. And so I don't finish this with a question mark, I put a full stop. So this is the concept that has been tested in recent tests. So for example, detailed data about crop health can guide crucial decisions for farmers, such as when to irrigate and whether to use chemical treatments. So these are crucial decisions for farmers, but since they are presented within a sentence, you don't have a question mark at the end. Hansberry pointedly asked Simone what she was doing for the movement while its most visible leader sat in a jail cell. So you can see that this is indirect speech. She asked Simone what she was doing for the movement. So you finish it with a full stop. Right, so those were the rules of punctuation that you need to know for SAT and ACT. In a future video, I'll take up some questions. I'll discuss some questions that employ these rules. So right now, the purpose was simply to introduce these rules and to kind of get you to understand how each of these punctuation marks works. Okay, hope this was useful. I'll see you guys soon in another video. Bye-bye, take care.